Hey everybody, how's it going? Good morning. Welcome to Ellensburg, Washington. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. The local time, as I suck on a hard candy, the local time is 11:47 a.m. Pacific time, and today's date is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. If you're watching this in replay in the future, our program will begin in 13 minutes, something like that. Excuse me for that. I am loose, I am relaxed, I'm looking forward to today. And we have 225 watching live at the moment, and we will have folks continuing to pour in. They will see that little live icon, little red label with the white letters, live, as they're on YouTube, I guess. I guess that's how people know we're live. Whatever. Maybe people get an email as soon as we start live, but a bunch of you are here already. Now more than 300. Where are you viewing from? Can I say hi to a number of you? And then I have a question for you this morning before we begin. Marcia's in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Naoki is in Yokohama, Japan, receiving 5x5, which means loud and clear. Hello. Frigid, Thunder Bay, Ontario is frigid. Yes, I'm sure that it is. Many of you. We are at 31 degrees Fahrenheit. We have nothing to complain about here. We have herky-jerky students in a class change right now, but we don't have any snow down here in the valley. And we have 31 degrees Fahrenheit. It's kind of raw out there, as my dad used to say, but still, 31 degrees is much better than many of you. Fairwood, Washington. Oh, my God. Okay. Let me scroll back. Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Janesville, Wisconsin. Natchez, that's Pat the Pilot from Natchez, Washington. Ottawa, Canada. Baja, Mexico. Peridot, Arizona. Hello, Greg. Veronica says, good evening from the Alsace region in France. Hello, Veronica. Phil, the Index Pluton. Come on, baby. Finally, Phil. We're talking about your home turf. Kirk from Sweden. Mike from Tennessee. Amy from, good afternoon, from sunny Sacramento. Another Gary. I'm going to show one of your photos today. Yet another Gary. Gary from Kalamazoo. I'll try to remember that. John from Kelowna, BC. John, the lone Youper, is with us. Tommy says hello from chilly Spokane. I'm down to live. John is in Hubbard, Oregon. Tess is in Olympia, Washington, formerly the Skagit County area. Stephen Cook says, greetings from Missoula, Montana. We're at 17 degrees Fahrenheit. Colin in Mission Hills, Los Angeles. I hope you're doing okay down there, Colin. Dan says it's -8 it's 27 in Pittsburgh, but it was -8 a couple days ago. Leslie is 27 degrees in Boxborough. Okay, everybody's giving their weather report now. Yeah, it's January. Come on, man, it's January. It's January. Up here in the Northern Hemisphere, it's January. It's cold. And we have sun. And so the sun goes a long way for me. I don't know about for you, but I like to walk. And if there's sun, and if there's not a lot of snow and ice to navigate, then I really enjoy being out there and walking. Bonus points if you actually are making eye contact with people walking the other way. But that's just, people like me of a certain age are used to that. There's a certain custom about looking somebody in the eye and a little nod and maybe even a little good morning. But the younger people don't quite do that. They're all removed from anything except their little world. So it's kind of a drag, I have to say, sometimes. Like I was just walking right now. It's like I'm walking on campus with a bunch of zombies, a bunch of heroin addicts. They just look unhealthy. They're just, okay, enough of that, enough of that. I have a question for you before we begin. I've had enough little nibbles of this thought that it's dawning on me that people consume these letters differently. So my question is, how do you watch these programs? And I think I'm going to be surprised. Maybe I'm not. But I all imagine you just out there having a laptop computer propped up on your kitchen table and you're having a little lunch or whatever and you're watching this and you're like watching a TV program and your eyes are on the screen the whole time, even though I'm on the screen most of the time. But my new thought from a number of you is that some of you don't really watch this just sitting there. I mean, some of you, I think, are really into it and you're taking notes and the whole thing. Okay, so that's like a class. What I'm getting at is I think some of you are doing something else. You have this thing playing, whether it's live or even in replay. I'm talking to replay viewers as well. I don't know, do you just prop this thing up on the kitchen counter and you're like, I'm just kind of over there by the toaster and occasionally you'll glance up at what's going on, but for the most part you're making bread or you're making tonight's meal or you're washing the dishes or whatever. Or maybe it's even to the extreme where you never watch. Like this is YouTube and there's a video part of it and there's Gary Paul photos again today and there's video clips and other things. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of you only listen to this. Like maybe even you have a long commute in and out of the big city. And whether it's live or after the fact, you fire this program right now up on your YouTube app on your phone, I guess. And you just pump my voice through your car speakers. And maybe I'm on the phone and maybe if there's something piques your interest, maybe you like do a quick glance while you're driving at your phone screen. I'm guilty of that, I must say. But I'm starting to wonder, and it never even occurred to me, but I'm starting to wonder if these episodes can stand alone in audio form only. Like it's a 2-hour program, but like can it be a 2-hour audio podcast where there is no video? Maybe there's enough going on verbally that it kind of works. And I lied. Now that I said that out loud, I think I did have that thought a couple of years ago. And I'm like, should I take the audio out of each of these letters and put them on my audio podcast? And would people listen and just enjoy they're totally freed up to be out for a run or whatever, and then they're just listening to it. But maybe back to my thought for this episode right here, maybe you're out for a walk. And I'm in your earbuds, your AirPods, or whatever the hell they're called, and occasionally maybe you take the phone out to look at a map or something, but otherwise you're just taking your walk. I'll be very interested. It never really occurred to me to drill that deeply into the specific visuals about how you're watching, or maybe not watching, listening. I'm really going to be interested in what you have to say. So it's 5 minutes before the top of the hour. I think our stations are working. I don't know why, but I think I'm going to jinx it. When's the last time we've had a technological problem? We haven't really had a technological problem the entire winter, have we? We had an interruption, but that wasn't technology. That was for a different reason. But I mean, I remember I used to like test all the stations and make sure Docky was working and all that. Like, that's not a thing anymore. And of course, I've just jinxed it, but Not the Wonder Boy is truly a wonder boy. That reminds me, though, I did want to remind you that tomorrow, Friday, January 24th, at noon Pacific time, there will be a live stream, and I will be your host. Dr. Tim Melbourne, who teaches in this building, will be giving a talk on earthquake and tsunami early warning. That is sure to be a good talk. Very different than our Cascade stuff, but I know that will be a good one. And Chris Mattinson, who we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to be talking about Chris's dad, he's giving a talk a week from tomorrow. And so I'll keep reminding you about this, but you're going to see me, if you're really into what's going on here, you're going to see me 3 times, today, tomorrow, and Saturday. And this afternoon, I have to go set up all that stuff in the auditorium because I haven't done it since before Liz's accident. So it's been almost 2 months. I don't think I remember how to set it all up. So I'm going to be testing probably this afternoon. Okay, Keith says, what about the jerky students outside? Okay, Keith, to me, that's not a problem. To me, that's not a problem. That's an easy fix. I think I just need a shorter cable, but okay. Actually, you have a herky-jerky camera? Okay, we get it. I'm talking about like aborting the whole live stream, which we did like a year ago, if you remember. We started a whole episode and I just said, sorry, the quality's crap. I need to get Nat in here. We haven't had anything like that in a long time, and I'm grateful to Nat and you. 550 live viewers. I'm going to take my walk. Thank you for joining us. We will start in 4 minutes. Hot mic. Okay. You want to enjoy today. If you don't enjoy today, if you're rushing today, nobody's going to enjoy the program. It's a different program. It's a different program. Set the tone early. Be positive, be relaxed, and make sure everybody is feeling comfortable with what you want to do, because it's unusual today. You have to do that. And then once you get rolling, there's a lot, but don't rush. Just enjoy the ride and follow the breadcrumbs and you'll be fine. Okay, go take your walk. Herky-jerky. 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 A pleasant good afternoon to you all, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA. It's almost like this is a radio program right now. You're just listening to my voice, talking about the beginning of this episode. What's the title today, you say? Chilliwack Rainbow. That's the title, Chilliwack Rainbow. Now that title alone needs explanation. Some of you maybe already have it figured out, but that's an unusual title, and my first message is today's an unusual show. Today's a show that I think will be memorable, especially if I pull it off the way that I want to pull it off, the way that I want to deliver this episode. I want to do a story with you, and it's kind of a combination of exciting brand new science, unknown to me 48 hours ago, and also behind the scenes, essentially, how the sausage is made. For whatever reason, I've been commenting the last couple of episodes on what we're doing and saying it's unusual and everything else. I don't know why. I just feel like I need to for some reason I haven't figured out yet, by the way. But today is showing how unusual this episode is, how these episodes are, how this series is, and how what we're doing together really stands alone, and it's very, very unique. At the beginning of the alphabet back in early November, I had a couple of hopes, and I think I verbalized them something like this. Number one, I hope some geologists watch this thing, and I hope that geologists will be engaged with what we're doing, and I hope some geologists actually email me, send me some stuff, and we involve them the best we can, whether it's a Zoom interview in the video library by itself, or maybe somehow like showcasing their emails that they send to me or whatever. Well, that's happening. More and more people are geologists who are watching. They've heard about it. They're a little late, by the way. They're getting caught up. Chris Mattinson upstairs is all caught up. He's part of today's episode. Rob Vians, who I've never met but teaches geology in Bellevue, he'll be showcased on Saturday. So there's plenty of that happening. But I think the other thing that I said at the beginning of the series was something like, I don't know what we're going to do. I have a plan. I'm going to unveil decades by color, but I don't know exactly how we're going to operate, and I don't know how many letters are going to be devoted to each color, and I'm not even sure the colors are going to work. And that's the main thing we're doing today. We're changing the color scheme. And you're like, no, don't. I like this series. I like what we're doing. What are you doing? You're going to change the colors? Yeah. I had a plan for today. All through the weekend, I had a plan. And then Tuesday morning, I got an email that I'm still recovering from, in a good way. Okay, not totally in a good way. I read that email, and I read the paper that was attached on Tuesday morning, 48 hours ago. And I think the first 3 minutes I scared Bijou, because I'm sitting at home. I'm like, God, I'm going to have to change my colors. So that was my first thought, like, this screws up the plan. But I quickly got over that. And I have been cogitating on all that's in the new paper for us today. And so one specific thing we're doing today is we're not going color by color. We're going to talk about 4 different colors today. You know, if we look at Docky and we say, okay, welcome everybody. Thursdays at noon, Saturdays at 8 a.m. Pacific. You know, and we have a lot of. I hope that you've figured out. We have a lot of customs at this point, almost rituals that some of us have been doing for 4 years. A toast to you, and all these phrases. You know, I love you, and that's all from 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, the pandemic time. But I hope each of these episodes feels like they stand alone and they have their own personality. And I think today's is really going to stand out as being maybe kind of a watershed moment for us. We'll see, but we're scrambling the plan today. That's the main message. So even though we look at Docky and we say, remember the old plan was, well, we did 2 dark blue and then 2 light blue. That's the early days of the Cascades. And I was saying, well, we only have 2 letters to devote to green in the 30s because I really want to get to the 20s. We're doing green, red, yellow, brown, purple, frickin' pink. I don't probably make up some new colors. We're doing a rainbow today. And you're like, I don't think I like this. I was comfortable with our general plan. So I'm trying to set the tone, set the hook. Nick Zentner setting the hook. This is Third Person Thursday. Nick Zentner is setting the hook for the episode. It's maybe a little too long-winded, Nick Zentner is. So here's one way to do it, in addition to verbally. Let's go to Docky, and let's go to a piece of paper. Yeah, by the way, so this hasn't changed. We're working our way to Z at the end of February. This hasn't changed. Somehow I'm going to make 3 brand new lectures devoted to all the new stuff we've learned on the Cascade volcanoes and the history of the Cascade Volcanic Arc, and even earlier than the Cascade Volcanic Arc, Thursday, April 3rd, Friday, April 4th, Saturday, April 5th, all of them at 7 p.m. in downtown Ellensburg a couple months from now. The Morgan Middle School Auditorium. No tickets, free and open to anybody. And then, yes, we're saving the modern Cascades, the most recent, I guess, 2 million years of time, for the Geology 351 course that I'm doing with my students. And I will be live streaming. I finally got permission to live stream. I'm going to live stream each of the 351 classes. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays and Thursdays, April and May, into early June at noon. Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon. There'll be 1-hour lectures with students in there. And we're just going to have the students. I lost that battle, so we're not going to have all of you sitting in the classroom, whatever. So it'll be just me and the students in a smaller classroom, but I'll have it all wired up. I'll get Nat to help me, and we'll live stream modern Cascade stuff this spring. Okay, what am I trying to get to? I'm trying to get to the final way that I want to set the hook today. This is something called the Chilliwack Batholith. I'm explaining now the title today, Chilliwack Rainbow. The Chilliwack Batholith is a monster blob that shows up on all geologic maps. It's so big that it straddles the international boundary. So this is the North Cascades of Washington. Ellensburg's way down here off the piece of paper. Here's up in Canada in the British Columbia province. This thing is the Straight Creek Fault, which we'll talk a little bit about today. And the Straight Creek Fault is interrupted by the Chilliwack Batholith. So before this week, what have I known about the Chilliwack Batholith? Jack squat. In other words, up until this week, I only had one number in mind for the Chilliwack Batholith. 35 million years old. 35 million years old. In the 30s, 35 million years old. And so up until Tuesday morning of this week, my plan was to just get a green Sharpie. Let's get a lighter green. My plan was just to take my green Sharpie and just color the Chilliwack Batholith, 35 million years old. It's a batholith that was formed in the 30s, and we're good. And we'll color the Squire Creek Pluton, and we'll color the Index Pluton. We'll color them all green. They're all 30s. They're all in the 30s. And I was going to spend either today or Saturday on the green Plutons, and then the other day was going to be the green Ohanapikosh, because the green Ohanapikosh, like you said, I thought today was going to be the Ohanapikosh. We're scrambling our eggs. The Ohanapikosh is Saturday, and the Ohanapikosh is green. But my point is, if I set the hook, this is the Chilliwack Batholith. Some of it is definitely green. But some of the Chilliwack Batholith is red in the 20s. And some of the Chilliwack Batholith, that doesn't look yellow. That looks grello. We don't want that. Some of the Chilliwack Batholith is yellow. And some of the Chilliwack Batholith is purple. And Mount Baker Volcano is essentially the modern version of the Chilliwack Batholith. So, do you see why today's episode is called Chilliwack Rainbow? I was faced with a problem with our color scheme. Instead of marching decade by decade through time using the colors, we've got one batholith, the Chilliwack Batholith, that has been active almost continuously for 35 million years. We'll look at some details from the paper today. So that's why I said, God, how am I going to color the Chilliwack? I got to use all the colors. And that has freed me up to realize that I can talk about all of these batholiths. Because the Snoqualmie batholith is going to have different colors in it as well. And maybe the Spirit Lake Pluton by the time Mike Eddy and Isla from Stanford are done with it. So suddenly we're talking about all of the Plutons, all the Cascade Plutons in Washington simultaneously, which was not the plan originally. I hope by now you are excited as I am, and that you can see why we're taking a different tact. We're doing more than tweaking. We're doing less than blowing up the whole plan. Whatever word works for a little bit more than mega tweaking. I don't know. Tweaking sounds... Okay, so that's my hook setting that took more than 10 minutes, but I wanted to really lean into it, and I think I did. Okay, so let's go to the website and remind you that there are papers, always, for every episode there are papers waiting for you, and I have a Mullen 2018 paper, This is the Bomb in the Marketplace. This paper, which I did not know about, and you'll notice that Emily Mullen is the lead author. She's from France. Jean-Louis Paquette is from France. Third author, Jeffrey Tepper. I thought we were done with Jeffrey Tepper. I thought Jeffrey Tepper was in the rearview mirror. I thought we were done with the Tepper trilogy and the mayor of Tepperville and all that stuff. Yeah, Jeff, he might be in the live chat. He's visiting his parents in Philadelphia. I thought we were done with that guy. No. Jeff Tepper, I think, is going to be with us until the end of the alphabet. He is one of the premier Cascade igneous petrologists that we have. Plus, he likes what's going on here, and he's involved. So Jeff Tepper's the guy that sent me this paper. Thank you, Jeff. And Stuart McCallum is Jeff's former professor, his major professor at the University of Washington. And McCallum also was a geology professor for Gary Paul, who's also going to be featured heavily today. Here's one of Tepper's papers that summarizes his PhD. So Jeff Tepper literally did his PhD on today's subject, the Chilliwack Batholith. Jim Mattinson, University of California, Santa Barbara, has a Tatouche paper from 1977. And we're going to go back to the 1960s as well, looking at this iconic paper on the geology of Mount Rainier National Park. And you have the map as well. It's going to take a while to load, I think. There it is. You have the map as well in digital form. So are we going to Mount Rainier National Park? Yeah, we are a little bit today. Are we going to the Ohanapikosh in Mount Rainier National Park? No, that's Saturday. So we're in the 30s. We're kind of sticking to the plan, but I think by now you know. We're doing a bunch of things simultaneously, and it's my job to keep the narrative straight and to also try to convince you, if you need convincing, that doing all this stuff simultaneously is a smart move. You might resist this right now. I don't know what you're saying in the live chat. You might go, stick with the plan. Just do green stuff only. I don't care if there's different ages of stuff in the Chilliwack. Just stick with the green. Well, I want to show you by the end of today and Saturday why entertaining multiple colors simultaneously is a smart thing. At least I think it is. Okay, go. So that's the website. We're good. I'm going to follow the breadcrumbs, follow the slides. Some of this eases us into it, and some of it gets us there in a very visual form. If you're only listening on a phone right now, you're going to miss all these wonderful visuals. Okay, that's your choice. I get it. SWAC time. We begin, everybody. Orange is still orange. Orange is still the 50s, and we don't have Silesia, we don't have the Cascades, we don't have early days of the Cascade Volcanic Arc. We've got a lazy swamp with westward flowing rivers. We've already done it. Dark blue. We accrete Silesia, we break the Farallon plate, we have a breakoff belt. Magmas that are very unusual geochemically, not arc magmas, bimodal in nature typically, Teanaway bimodal, and so on. We've already done it. By the time we get to 43 million years ago, we have a broken Farallon plate that has been diving deeper and deeper under Washington. We have Adikites forming around the leading edge of the unusually hot portion. We're actually melting the downgoing plate itself. But in this neighborhood, we have already started the volcanic arc. These are the last two episodes where the light blue, 46 to 40, this is all review, everybody. We get this arc in place. We have a line of stratovolcanoes, hypothetically, although we were wondering the other day if we really had a towering set of mountains like we have today. Not sure. So we're reviewing, getting you into it, but I'm also tossing in some new stuff. Chris Mattinson, literally upstairs one floor. He's our metamorphic petrologist, but Chris knows so much. He's a hard rock guy that knows just as much igneous geochemistry and igneous petrography and metamorphic petrography and thin sections and zircon stuff. He is amazing. And he works very, very hard. And Chris has been here 20 years probably. And Chris Mattinson, who works in this department, is the son of Jim Mattinson, longtime Santa Barbara geology professor. So we're featuring both the son, Chris Mattinson, who's probably in his 40s, maybe early 50s by now, I don't know, and Jim Mattinson, who passed away a few years ago. So here's Chris, the son. It's like, I got caught up, Nick, over the break. I finally kind of took some time to watch all the letters in the alphabet. And specifically, I got an email a couple days ago, and Chris said, I appreciated your general audience-friendly explanation of arc rock spidergrams in yesterday's show. Okay. Can I remind you what a spidergram looks like from our work with Jeff Tepper? We were working with this one. Do you remember this discussion last time? And we said that if you look at the barium to niobium ratio, that's a thing that's changing over the course of the history of the volcanic arc. But that's not what Chris is talking about. Chris is talking about the look of a spidergram if you have an arc magma with a hump and a valley, a mountaintop and a valley. This look of lots of barium compared to tantalum and niobium. That's the look of an arc magma. And the difference is if you have a breakoff magma, dark blue, there's not nearly, double negative, there's not a valley. There's not a depletion valley for tantalum and niobium. So you've got the valley if you have an arc signature. Chris said by email, I think some of your live viewers were wondering why. And Jeff Tepper knows that as well, but he just wanted us to see the pattern because he knows I can only handle so much in my head. So Chris says, in case it's helpful to have a visual for why the niobium and tantalum are relatively depleted in arc rocks, I've attached a couple thin section photos of eclogite, which is what the subducting oceanic crust turns into as it sinks under the arc. The orange mineral is rutile, which contains nearly all of the niobium and tantalum in typical eclogites. And so the niobium and tantalum stay locked in the downgoing slab and don't end up in arc magmas. So before I show you the photos, which were taken through a microscope, that's what a thin section is. We can shave a rock down so that it's paper thin. We put it on a microscope slide. We have a petrologic microscope. Instead of looking at pond water, we're looking at a rock, but it's shaved paper thin. We can see the minerals. And Chris has a whole course taught to both some of our undergraduates and our graduate students. It's one of our hardest classes. Geology 475, Geology 575, Petrography. And Chris says, I can show you a couple of thin sections to explain why we are low in niobium and tantalum. Here we go. So the rutile is, I got to read that again. You don't, but I do. Thin sections of eclogite. Rutile so in the rutile is most of the niobium and tantalum. And the rutile stays in the eclogites and goes down the tubes. So the niobium and the tantalum is in this eclogite, and the eclogite is not in the continental crust, or it's not even in the mantle wedge, as I understand it. Instead, the rutile is in the eclogite, it's in the actual downgoing slab, and so here's this stuff so those two elements are present, but they never left the ocean plate. If you're curious about all these abbreviations, there's garnet, omphacite, rutile, titanite, lawsonite. I've heard these words. I've never really seen thin sections. Here's another one. So these are some that Chris's students, our geology majors, worked on this past fall quarter. There's the rutile again, which you can barely see, but all these other minerals in a thin section through the work of Chris Mattinson and his students. Where? Central Washington University. Come on, man. We're not doing a bunch of softball classes. We teach hard stuff. We teach hardcore stuff here. With the most modern geology and the most modern techniques and the most modern building and the most modern equipment. Everything's modern, except for the guy who's using YouTube. Moving on. Thank you, Chris Mattinson, for your help. We transitioned from the early days where we were looking at blue last couple of episodes. Remember, we were talking about this set of magmas that are from the earliest days of the Cascade Volcanic Arc. That's not today. But we were wondering, I was wondering at least, if we had any kind of mountainous scene in the early days time. In the 40s, did we really have any kind of semblance of a mountain range or an upland even? And that's Saturday. I want to pick up that elevation discussion on Saturday. And one of the main messages from the Ohanapakash and other units on Saturday, including the Wenatchee Formation and Lincoln Creek Formation and so on, I'm saving that for Saturday. But I'm just reminding you of a few of the threads that we've got. So we're tweaking our major story. We're tweaking our major approach for the rest of the alphabet. That's what I'm saying today. But our little threads about uplift and our threads about how wide is the volcanic arc and our threads about triple junction location, what's going on out in the water, those threads, I want to keep track of some of those threads coming through. Threads coming through. Even in Ohanapakash time, are we like this? That's Saturday. Or are we even totally blue here, ironically? Are we totally underwater? Very good. So this is, surprisingly, another Jeff Tepper show, but it's also a Gary Paul show. And I want to remind you, we talk almost every time about Gary. I think Gary's skiing today. He's not going to be with us live. But we talk about Gary Paul almost every time, and we are unveiling some brand new Gary Paul photographs today that Gary hustled and color-coded based on the new scrambled color scheme, which I haven't even unveiled yet. I'm milking this too far now, but anyway, I'm reminding you, Gary Paul is a retired Forest Service employee with decades and decades of backcountry experience, working trail crews, managing trail crews, both on the east slopes of the Cascades and the west slopes. Hardly anybody knows the Cascades better than Gary Paul. This is the guy that was up in the airplane with me and Pat the pilot. This is the guy that I make scouting videos with. This is the guy that's the field producer for the PBS show. And I didn't know Gary in the fall of 2020, but he started sending these yellow labeled photographs from the crystalline core of the North Cascades. And these photos got me excited about this guy Gary. So I finally met him and just rolled with him ever since. I'm reminding you that this fall, just a few months ago, I had the idea that maybe Gary could tweak, I guess that's the drinking word today, tweak some of his photographs and use different colors for the different rock units so that at a glance you can see our color scheme if we have it by heart. And then as we look at some of these stunning photographs from the Cascades, Gary can say, well, yeah, here's the Roaring 20s, and here's the dark blue of the Barlow. It's a break-off belt magma. And here's green. Here's the Goblin Creek stock. Zooming in, we can see more detail. So I don't even have to look. We can all agree that these rainbow labeled photographs are one of the best things about this winter series. Right? I don't need a show of hands. I know that for a fact. You've seen some of these already, and I'm going to show them again. So in other words, so far, I'm going to show you some rainbow photos that we have already seen. But now that we're trying to juggle multiple colors simultaneously, I'm trying to train us to start thinking that way. And I'm trying to train myself to get comfortable jumping back and forth between the colors. And the rainbow photo, I see a bunch of rainbow icons. Lindsay, Malone, a bunch of rainbow icons already right in here. So let's just keep going with some photos that have already been unveiled that you'll recognize from past letters, but they're all coming from this guy, Gary Paul. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, this is the brand new episode today or tonight on PBS. Up at Washington Pass. This is the last of the new episodes. We've done 8 of them this winter. This is the last of the 8 brand new episodes. And we were showcasing the Golden Horn Batholith, dark blue, break-off belt, 48 million years old. And this is Brady Lawrence and Gary up on Washington Pass. And they must have spent 45 minutes taking photos of this mountain goat around the corner. Of course, the mountain goat made it in the episode. So I'm reminding you of the rainbow labels that we have already seen. I'll pick up the pace just a bit. But, I mean, as we work our way through the letters, hopefully these colors and these units make more and more sense to us. Here's today's topic, index granite. Today's topic, index granite. What? December. We're talking about the Chuckanut, which is also swak time. Gray and Grello. There's the index. I hope you know what I'm doing right now. I'm not killing time. I'm having us commune with the rainbow photos because there's a new batch coming within a half an hour. Yeah, Gary, come on, man. And this is the old color scheme. This works. I love this one. And this was the first time I had a slight twinge. When did I show this one? 3 weeks ago, maybe? I had a slight twinge because I'm like, I didn't comment on it, but I noticed, and maybe you did too. Oh, shit, we got 2 different colors for the Snoqualmie Batholith. We got red. That's not a mistake. Gary's got Roaring 20s, red, Snoqualmie Batholith. He's got the same Batholith. He's got yellow. That was our first little taste of a batholith that had 2 different colors, red and yellow, which is a thing. And I just kind of like pretended I didn't see it, basically. Well, I can't pretend anymore. Ohana Prakash coming on Saturday. Vesper, Squire Creek. In the 35 neighborhood, green. There's a lot to absorb on these photographs. And those precious few of you who have experience in the backcountry, I've already heard from many of you. I've heard from many of you who know the Pacific Crest Trail, or you do Alpine Lakes hiking all the time. You've spent a lifetime hiking in the mountains. I've heard from many of you. And you are very specific in your praise of these photographs. Because you're like, I had no idea what I was walking through. I know the Cascades. I've spent 50 summers in the Cascades. But I look at plants. I look at fish. I look at glaciers or whatever. This bedrock thing I just never gave much thought to. Or maybe I knew a couple of little factoids that I'd share with my hiking partners. But this whole thing of taking landscapes that I know and putting labels on them and assigning ages and concepts, that is a mind blower. I think it's a mind blower for all of us, but it's especially meaningful to many who know the Fred Beckey books and other things, and you can read the text, but this is a new way to bring that text to life. This looks like a thrust fault, but it's not. It's the Straight Creek Fault. It's a strike slip fault. I think we're going to push in. I mean, and now we got a new look from Gary besides. Not only is he doing rainbow photos, he's doing black and white. This is fucking Ansel Adams now with colored labels. Gary's out of control. I've lost track. I think you've seen these. Maybe you haven't yet. I don't know. Columbia Glacier. Barlow Peaks. These are the right colors. Fives Peak Volcanics. We'll get there, but we're not just ignoring them now. Nick Zentner's full of double negatives today. Yeah. If you're losing it, then you're like, have you started yet? Have you talked about any geology yet? Plenty. You're not listening carefully if you think that I'm still BSing. But one of the things we're trying to emphasize right now is that I'm changing the rest of the alphabet. I'm trying to say it a different way. We're now leaning into the idea that we can look back and look ahead and also absorb in the moment the different decades, the different eras. And we will just continue with that sort of thing. Okay. So this is maybe overkill for some of you, but I want to do it this way. So we're going to do it. I want to tell a story about this past week so that you can tangibly see how fluid we are with this series and how if something bubbles up and it's an opportunity and it's new and it's exciting, we just steer towards it. We don't just close our eyes and pretend it doesn't exist. We just go right in. Go, okay, bring it on. Maybe we can figure out how to incorporate it. So I was done with you Saturday morning, right? Whether it was live or not. And I said, see you on Thursday. We'll do green in the 30s, and we'll be looking at the Johanna-Pakash Formation. Can't wait for that. See you. Bye-bye. And went home, and the rest of Saturday I spent with Liz. We were out hiking and enjoying the sun and chit-chatting, and she's like 98% with her health. And she's returning to the classroom part-time on Tuesday. So we're all grateful, super grateful. She's still busy with thank you cards and other kinds of gestures and getting herself back into her work life. She's starting to get bored. She's not ready to be retired yet. She's 59, but she's ready to go back to school. But that was Saturday. Total fun. Sunday morning, she said, I think I just want to read and relax. I'm a little bit sore this morning. So I left the house and drove over to Wenatchee and did a video. And some of you have seen it already. It's in the video library if you haven't. And I said, where can I go in the 30s on this cold, frigid morning? And I said, I can go to Wenatchee. Maybe I can find some Wenatchee formation. And I did. And we'll talk a little bit about that on Saturday. In other words, next episode. And in that last episode, I also said goodbye to Jeff Tepper and said, thanks for the memories, but we're done with you, buddy. I didn't really, but like I was mentally kind of thinking that I would ease off of me continually bugging Jeff Tepper. So that was Sunday morning, and I had a plan for this week. And Sunday night, I started Googling the Chilliwack Batholith. And whose name do I start running into? And I'm like, of course, I forgot. How could I forget this? Jeff Tepper did his master's degree at the University of Washington on the Chilliwack Batholith, and he did his PhD from the University of Washington with Stu McCallum on the Chilliwack Batholith. So I was like, why did I say goodbye to Jeff Tepper when I was going to start thinking about green, and one of the obvious green batholiths is the Chilliwack? So that's Sunday night. So I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't know. I'll do something with the Chilliwack either Thursday or Saturday, and definitely a bunch of Ohanapakash, and that's probably plenty. Maybe a little bit of Wenatchee Formation. So Monday morning, I sent an email to both Jeff and Gary. You guys, I'm pretty sure this is my plan. Thursday, I'm going to do Perseus and Index with some Grello. I'm going to do a Parade of Plutons, Vesper, 35 million years old. Squire Creek, 35. Chilliwack, 35. Hey, is everything really 35? I typed it quickly before I don't remember what I did. I guess took a walk with Liz. What are the best dates that we have for these Plutons? The Straight Creek Fault ends 35. Hey, what happened 35 million years ago? Is 35 million years ago a big event somehow? Has anybody wondered this? I'll probably toss in some Wenatchee Formation and Lincoln Creek Formation, quiet scenes. What is the latest on Snoqualmie Falls? I've heard that it's not Perseus volcanics. Is that true? Whose date says no, it's not possible? And then I shared my Saturday plan as well. That's going to be Ohanapakash. Deep dive into the Ohanapakash. Video clips from Mount Rainier. Ohanapakash is in the gorge as well. Merle Beck did some paleomag in that neighborhood, and we're going to look at a paper by Merle. Ohanapakash is submarine. What's global sea level doing in the 30s, by the way? What happened to the mountains? Why is the floor dropping to preserve 20,000 vertical feet of Ohanapakash? The subduction factory, the Cascade Volcanic Arc, keeps making magmas. No change in output over 46 million years, but the floor is either dropping or lifting. And that's what allows us to see incredibly thick formations sometimes, barely any thickness other times. This might seem like a weird email to you, but those that know what's going on in the alphabet and those geologists that I trust to just kind of think out loud, I just put a bunch of stuff out there. And usually people reply, geologists in other words, and quite often they just ignore like 7 of the sentences because it's like out there or whatever. They don't know, they don't have anything to say. So I just like throw a bunch of bird seed out there basically and see what birds come and start nibbling away. Weird. Ohanapakash are 32 to 26. Green rock for the green 30s, but Ohanapakash is more in the 20s than 30s. Damn it. That's before I got the email from Tepper, but I was already bummed. I thought I remembered the Ohanapakash was mostly in the 30s. That's why I picked green literally for the 30s, because there's a bunch of green rocks. Well, it turns out that's true. The Ohanapakash doesn't start until 32 million years ago. Like the 30s are almost over and we're starting the Ohanapakash. So I was already bummed. Set the stage for the Roaring 20s mayhem if it really is more violent than the 30s. Okay, so I sent that Monday morning, went out and walked a bunch with Liz, started thinking more seriously. It was a holiday, Monday. So I had a little bit more time around the house, screwing around. And you may start to lose it now with a bunch of these names of these places. So let's pause, go to Docky, and look at a map that I made very quickly and in amateur form yesterday. Okay? Let's involve as many of you as possible if you feel like you're losing interest. Slow down. Talking to myself. It was fun to make this little map. I wouldn't say it's super sexy, but I think it's effective. I might eventually make one that's a little more pleasing to look at. Let's do some geography very quickly. John Stockton's house in Spokane, Washington, Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon is down here. This is the Columbia River flowing to the Pacific Ocean. Here's the line separating Washington from Canada and British Columbia. Here are the San Juan Islands, and yes, the Vancouver Islands on here too. I just forgot to put it on. Sorry, Canadians. Sorry. Here's the star of the show today, the Chilliwack Batholith, Squire Creek Pluton, Cloudy Pass Pluton or Batholith. You're not new to us, right? I typically interchange batholith and Pluton. They both mean roughly the same thing. You have a large volume of magma underground feeding some sort of volcano at the surface. If you solidify that magma and cool it completely underground in the dark, there's a nice coarse texture to the minerals. You erode all the volcanic stuff away, and now you have this underground magma chamber rock at the surface. A batholith is a much larger version of a Pluton. Pluton is a term used that's a larger batch than a stock. There's all these different names. It's just, how big is your magma chamber underground? That's essentially what we're saying. So I'm using batholith and Pluton interchangeably. You want a fun fact? Are you a fact person? You want a fun fact? Reading the newspaper today? The Chilliwack Batholith is composed of at least 55 different Plutons. I had to read that 3 times. The Chilliwack Batholith is composed of at least 55 different smaller magma intrusions, which we can call Plutons. How stupid to think I could just punch 35 with my green marker and say, Chilliwack Batholith, formed 35 million years ago, caused the Straight Creek Fault to stop, or at least that's evidence the Straight Creek Fault stopped moving. Come on, man. 55 different injections of magma in the same thing over the last 35 million years? Damn, son. Damn. Sorry. Back to the map. So an adjustment is that we're trying to entertain all of these Plutons. Chilliwack, Cloudy Pass, Squire Creek, Index, Grotto, Snoqualmie, Tatoosh, Bumping Lake, Spirit Lake, Silver Star. I'm essentially unveiling all of the major characters for the rest of the alphabet today. I'm not saving any of them. Maybe I am. Maybe there's a few that I'm not addressing right now. I'm sure you'll have a few suggestions. But I'm just trying to get everybody on the table, and we'll start comparing and contrasting between these different Plutons. Please remember that the Spirit Lake Pluton is one of the major points of emphasis for this series. And if you can see carefully, I have black triangles for the active cones. So here's Baker and Glacier Peak and Mount Rainier and Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams. This open triangle is the former Goat Rocks volcano. This is the crest of the Cascades. And I chose to put in some highways that are well-known roads that cross the Cascades. Yakima to Centralia on US 12 and White Pass. Ellensburg to Seattle on Interstate 90, crossing Snoqualmie Pass. Wenatchee to Everett on US 2, crossing Stevens Pass. And Pateros to Burlington on Washington State Route 20 over Washington Pass. Okay? Have I acknowledged each of these? Have I explained each of these? Those are the Plutons, and that's fine. We can just look at a map of Plutons. But realizing that they're not all the same age, and that some of them are truly a rainbow, and some of them are from the 30s, and some of them are from the 20s, and some of them are 20s in the teens, and some of them question mark. That's where we're leading. And it's fun to find this new approach. That's where I am currently. I might get a headache at some point, but I'm looking forward to this adjusted approach. Jeff Tepper last night visiting his parents sent this at midnight. Well, Nick, I just had a thought. Maybe you'd want a more professional, or maybe he didn't know I had that hand-drawn thing. He's like, here's a map I have for the Plutons in the North Cascades, including some other names that I'm not using now and I may not use. I'm not sure. I'll have to, this is kind of a workshop now. I don't know if I'll redirect and use a couple extra names. Southern Plutons as well. I never heard of the Silver Star. I looked it up on my own because I was intrigued by it on one of the maps I was using, and then verified by Jeff Tepper last night. I don't use all these names today. I might end up doing that. Okay. It's my choice now to step back 60 years in the early 1960s and talk a little bit about our leaps forward in getting ages for plutons, because that's ultimately what our discussion is today. We have these massive magma chamber plutons, or batholiths even, but can we get their ages? And how have we evolved in our thinking about ages of these different magma chamber plutons or batholiths since I've been alive? We go back to when I was born, basically, in the early 1960s. Let's do it. We start with this absolutely stunning publication that is still one of the gold standards for Cascades geology. 1963, The Geology of Mount Rainier National Park, Washington. Co-authors Richard Fisk, Clifford Hobson, Aaron Waters. So I knew about Aaron Waters for the Ice Age floods and Bretts. He's the one that wrote that beautiful letter to Bretts, by the way, if you remember, choking up about that. Cliff Hobson was, so in other words, Aaron Waters taught geology at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. And Fisk and Hobson were two of his students. And because Aaron Waters was from Washington, he kept bringing his grad students from the East Coast out to the West Coast and specifically to Washington. And Waters had an affiliation with the USGS and the National Park Service. One of the other students, in addition to Hobson and Fisk, was Don Swanson, who's still with us. He's in his 80s. He's in his late 80s. But Don Swanson is one of the biggest names in all of geology. Forget about the Cascades. He was tight with David Johnston during the 1980 Mount St. Helens drama. And Swanson, Hawaii work, Yellowstone work, Columbia River basalt work, and Cascades. So I mentioned Don because I've done 2 interviews with him in the video library, and Don gives us a little personal insight into this work from Aaron Waters and his students. Don.
Written. But yeah, there was some interagency agreement between the Park Service and the USGS that got going. Aaron was then a consultant with the USGS, and so he was asked by the USGS to do it, and Cliff and Dick Fisk got involved. And incidentally, I should mention another person, Tom Wright. Tom is not an author of that paper, but Tom did his PhD thesis on the Tatoosh Pluton in Mount Rainier National Park, and has published several papers. And remarkably, Dick Fisk and Tom Wright are colleagues of mine, and we still cooperate on research, even though, well, Dick is almost 90 and I'm 86 and Tom is 89.
Yeah. Well, was there a bullpen of other graduate students at Hopkins that were also doing work out here in the Pacific Northwest, or was it just you?
One person, Hans Ulrich Schmicke from Germany, was involved, and he and I arrived at the same time at Hopkins, and he did his work mainly on the Ellensburg Formation and on the lava flow that tongues with the Ellensburg in many places and burrowed into it, the Pomona flow.
Yeah.
So Hans was really...
Okay, that's we're going to keep coming back to Don Swanson, and I might try to check in with Don by email, see if he wouldn't mind watching a few of these episodes we're doing right now, because his he's done so much work in the Cascades. It would be fun to do a couple more interviews with him. So if you eventually watch a couple of these, hello, and I'm hoping to interview you again in late January, early February, if you have the time. If we go to Docky, here's another example of just an old-fashioned 1969 geologic map of Washington. And for years, in my whole career, all through the 90s and the aughts and the 2010s, I would just look at these blotches and I wouldn't even know the names of these things. Even out here, I didn't know much of this stuff. So together, you and I have done a lot with the North Cascades and the crazy Eocene, and now we're working our way through some of these peach-colored things. But the point is, Dick Fisk and the crackerjack geologists who were out working in the Mount Rainier area under Aaron Waters were actively wondering in the early 1960s, are all these plutons the same thing? You're like, which plutons? Like, let's go to the map. The leading experts of the day were doing work at the Tatoosh Pluton and the Snoqualmie Pluton and a little bit of reconnaissance with a few of these other plutons. And Dick Fisk in print is saying, are these things all connected down below? Is this like one massive magma chamber? This is even before plate tectonics, like 1963, and the fieldwork was done in the late 50s. But they're wondering if all these plutons are tied together somehow, because they didn't have the dating techniques to answer that question. Here's a passage from the Dick Fisk paper that you have. George Otis Smith and Mendenhall in 1900 were the first to establish that the granitic rocks in the core of the Cascade Range are of two ages, and that the younger rock, widely exposed in a batholith at Snoqualmie Pass, is of late tertiary age. They also suggested that the granitic rock underlying Mount Rainier might correlate with the granite at Snoqualmie Pass. A few years later, 1906, they mapped the Snoqualmie Batholith, the Ketchulus andesitic series, which we'll get to at some point soon, I think. Yep. Thus, the intrusive rocks record a complex history of magmatic rise in the Cascades, in part under truly plutonic conditions, but also under subvolcanic conditions of rapid chilling, dehydration because of close approach to the surface. The resultant variations in cooling history and endomorphic alteration have produced an extremely varied and complex suite of rocks. What am I reading from? 1963, Dick Fisk and fellow grad students and Aaron Waters, supervising geology professor. Despite this great variability, the plutonic rocks of Mount Rainier are not unique. They are strikingly similar to those of nearby Snoqualmie Batholith, whose position with respect to the Tatoosh mass is shown on this figure. They also show similarities to other intrusive masses in the Cascades. Among these are the one north of Spirit Lake. So now he's comparing Spirit Lake Pluton with the Tatoosh with the Snoqualmie. The Cloudy Pass up here at the close to Glacier Peak volcano. Still Star Peak, is that the same as Silver Star? Laurel Hill down in Oregon. All these possibly connect underground into a continuous plutonic body that underlies the entire northern Cascade Range at depth. But since there is no direct connection between them at the surface, and since the presence of a continuous plutonic mass beneath the Cascades is hard to prove, it seems best to designate the Pluton of Mount Rainier National Park by a separate name, instead of considering it part of the Snoqualmie mass. It accordingly is named the Tatoosh Pluton from the Tatoosh Range. Okay, so I'm trying to set up our leap most recently with the Chilliwack and the Rainbow, because there was just one color. If it's Roy G. Biv today, it was just R of Roy, I guess, back in 1963. Are you feeling what I'm trying to lay down here? Keep it moving. We then jump to 1977. And if this sounds vaguely familiar to you, I was making videos in September in Rainier Park. We'll look at some of those next time. I took the Fisk paper out. I took the Mattinson paper out. I was banging on rocks. No, I wasn't. I was in the national park. I was looking at rocks in the national park and reading from these papers. And I was realizing that that idea in the early 1960s of all these plutons being the same age, potentially, because they look very similar and they're all like tertiary. I then found a Jim Mattinson paper from 1977, which you also have, that says, here it is, 1977, and I've got this new technique at Santa Barbara where I'm pulling the mineral zircon out of these granites, and I've got a new lab technique to get some much more precise work out of these zircons. I've got better dates than you guys had a decade and a half ago, says Jim Mattinson in 1977. What did he say? Mattinson says, I've just screwed around in Rainier, basically. I just have stuff from the Tatoosh, but I've got samples not only from the Tatoosh, but it's not all the same stuff. Look at this, fellas. There's mostly fellas back then. Chilliwack goes from 50 to 18. So I've got egg on my face. If this was in print in 1977, and I still thought on Monday night that the Chilliwack was only 35 million years old, I mean, that's just embarrassing. What can I say? So Mattinson started to show that the zircon work can give us much more precise ages for each of these magmas, whether they're break off or not, whether they're near trench or not, whether they're early arc or not, whether they're mid arc or late arc or not. There's way more in that paper, but that was an idea an hour ago to include that. I don't have much more ready for you there. But it's a nice change, and it's a major leap forward in the age determination of these plutons. We've made another leap recently. That's where we're headed. So, Monday morning, still with that Monday morning email before I sign off to Gary and Jeff. Gary, I'm going to show more of your rainbow photos to remind everybody of the green units. We've just done that. Gary, if you're inspired by this email to send a few more rainbow photos, great, but no pressure. Jeff, the Chilliwack seems like a very big story. It's maybe even bigger than the Ohanapikosh. If the Chilliwack is important, then this week is the time to showcase it. I don't have any narratives thus far for the Chilliwack except that it's not broken by the Straight Creek Fault, so therefore it has to be younger than 35 million years old. Gary, your ideas on all this are important too. Let it fly if you have thoughts. So I get up on Tuesday morning. I open my laptop, and an email was sent the night before, late, from Jeff Tepper. You ready? We're going to have a new color scheme based on this email. I'm just going to read it to you. Bunch of it we're not going to be able to absorb right now, but we're going to be chewing on it the rest of the alphabet. It's 1 o'clock. I think I'm on schedule with what I want to do today. Here is the email that blew my frickin' mind, and I'm still concussed in a way over what Jeff Tepper sent on late Monday night and read by me Tuesday morning. Here we go. Nick and Gary, I'm attaching a paper that has the latest word on dating of granitic rocks in the North Cascades, and particularly in the Chilliwack, where ages range from 35 to 2 million years old, with a gap between about 18 to 11 million years old in the Chilliwack. Some of the new dates may relate to units in your photos, Gary, so you might have to change some of your photos. Obviously, if you ask me whether the Chilliwack is important, you'll get a very biased answer. But honestly, I think it does nicely to illustrate some themes relevant to the Cascades in general. These themes are also described in the Mullen paper, but here are some examples. So, what paper did he attach to the email that got me upset in the first 4 minutes and then elated for the next 2 days? This thing here. And I'm going to continue working with this thing. I'm going to continue taking more and more notes, underlining more and more stuff. There's gorgeous maps, which I haven't even used yet. There's a lot going on. They're even talking about subduction rates of ocean plates, including breaking out the Explorer plate different than the Juan de Fuca plate. They're combining, British Columbia with Washington geology, one of my favorite themes. They've got an age progression. We're not touching most of this. I'm just introducing you to the concept that this paper, with all these new dates, they've got dozens of brand new dates from the Chilliwack and other plutons north and south of the Chilliwack. There's a lot there. And I'm grateful to Jeff Tepper for sending the email to us. And I'm also embarrassed I didn't know about the paper. Oh well. Let's read it. Number one, the unusual thing about the Chilliwack magmatism is that it has remained active for longer than any other batholith in the Northwest. So it allows us to see temporal and spatial patterns. Number two, there was an initial pulse of activity starting about 35. And that's also the age of the Index Pluton, the Squire Creek Pluton, the Vesper Peak Pluton, and the Cascade Pass intrusions. So it was a wider scale event than just one batholith. This interval is viewed as a magmatic flare-up, similar to the earlier ones you talked about with the Dream Team in the North Cascades. In other words, remember with the Dream Team, we had 3 magmatic flare-ups, Cretaceous, a tweener flare-up, and then an Eocene flare-up, including the breakoff belt. That ended about 45 million years ago. This is younger than 35. So we're using that same concept of a magmatic flare-up, but now it's within the Cascade Volcanic Arc. Do you remember my concern a few letters ago? I'm like, as soon as we start the subduction factory, I think we might get bored. What's going to be changing once we start the subduction factory and we start the volcanic arc? Well, that was a concern that was unwarranted. Here's major changes just within the Chilliwack Batholith involving ages and volume of magmas being pumped in to northern Washington. Daddy's excited. Nick Zentner is excited on Third Person Thursday. I don't think there's a definitive explanation for this magmatic flare-up event, but over the history of the arc, there is a general decrease in magmatic production, and that seems to correlate with slowing of the subduction rate of the ocean plate. Wow. The final magmatic episode, I'm going to read this even though we're not ready, in the Chilliwack is particularly interesting because it defines a westward migration that ends up at Mount Baker. Over that path, there is a progression from 11 million years ago until 3 million years ago until the modern cone at Baker. There's a nice unroofing story. The cause of this magmatic progression is rotation of the crust, but in this case, the younger rocks are to the east because we are north of the pole of rotation. That's very cool to me. More fully explained in the new paper. It'd be easy to demo with Daki. Lastly, once you get north of the Chilliwack up in BC, there's a younger to the north age progression that is thought to be tracking the leading edge of the Juan de Fuca plate north as it moves. I'm not ready for that. Closing thought. The earliest Chilliwack plutons stitched the Straight Creek Fault. They are the constraint on when it stopped moving. Is it a coincidence that this magmatism is coincident with the cessation of the slip? I don't know. The arc has already been active for almost 10 million years by this time, so we cannot say that the slip stopped when the arc turned on the Straight Creek Fault. But maybe at a more local scale, there is a link. Oh boy, green M&M time. In Mike Eddy's model, this might be explained by having the green M&M triple junction pass by at this time. So there's a change in the subducting plate from Kula to Farallon, but the Kula vector is nearly parallel to the margin, so I can't see how the plate would subduct at all, regardless of where the triple junction was located. Okay, that's a blue ribbon email from geologist Jeff Tepper. Jeff's in the live chat, I think. So thank you, Jeff. You keep giving. You're a giver. You keep giving. And we're eventually going to finish with the index Pluton today. But this was the big moment right now. And I'm going to show you my revised attempt with the color scheme because of this email and this new paper. And so, I don't know if you're going to like this, and it's a work in progress. I might keep changing it, but here's where I am right now. You ready? Drum roll, please. You're like, I hate it. I hate it. Green is supposed to be the 30s. What are you doing? You got green going from 35 to 25. Why? You got red going from 25 to 19. I don't get it. You're like, I don't get it. Everything was nice and tidy. This is a mistake. This is a mistake. You had it laid out so perfectly. You're screwing it up. This is you talking to me. Maybe I am. I don't know. We'll see how much you like or dislike this. But as I've been doing lately, I wanted to just find some natural breaks in the geology and just tweak the colors. And you'll notice the Chilliwack is showing up in 4 colors. So the challenge is how to tell this story. And what's even the purpose of the colors if everything's going at the same time? Well, it's not exactly that way, but there's some hang-ups here. So I've revealed the new color scheme, but it's not final. I'll show you a couple reasons why. I did this 2 hours ago. I went to yoga to calm myself down and came back and just played with some colors quick before I took a walk here on campus. Let me show you a couple of binds I'm in currently. And I don't think these colors, I think I need a couple more colors basically. And like, oh my God, now you're really off the rails. You want more colors. Well, let me show you what I mean. I've had 2 days to read this Mullen paper, and there's a lot there. And so I'm going to continue to come back to the Mullen paper. I think it's going to be one of the most important papers of the whole series. So here's a couple of problems. You know, as I'm reading the Mullen paper again, I'm like, what was the age range again? Maybe this thing isn't going to work. And maybe you have a couple of ideas. Let me show you a couple of examples. Within the Mullen paper, here are the distinct phases of activity just within the Chilliwack. 35 million years ago to 32, the system kind of warms up. Then in the Chilliwack, 32 to 29, that's the biggest magmatic flare-up. Just in the Chilliwack. Then there's a slightly less, but still quite large magmatic flare-up, 29 to 22. Then the thing shuts off, 22 to 11. Then it starts back up again, 11 to 4, and I guess it's still going on. So what are you supposed to do with colors there? And then compare the Chilliwack with the Squire Creek and the Index and the Snoqualmie. And by the way, everybody seems to agree that the Grotto and the Snoqualmie are joined at depth. So these two guys are actually the same thing, apparently. Here are the newest dates-ish from this paper. And so there's some interesting, like, what's going on with the Hanapikosh that we're sneaking ahead to Saturday? Well, Hanapikosh, those are green lavas essentially erupting under the sea level, are between 32 and 26. and 32 and 29 exactly, that's the biggest flare-up of the Chilliwack. So the Ohanapikosh and the Chilliwack are both happening at the same time? And so on, and so on, and so on. So this is what I have currently. I no doubt will keep playing with it a little bit to find more natural breaks. But you've noticed I don't think anything's going on between 40 and 35. At least that's where I am right now. So I've just cheated and extended the light blue to 35 because I think it's kind of a dead time. I don't know. Maybe not. Can somebody find some major action between 40 and 35? I'm not sure we have it. And then 35 does appear to be a big date where we warm up the Chilliwack, we get the Index and the Squire Creek firing off, and at 32, the Ohanapikosh and the Chilliwack are going crazy. All right. I want to keep it moving because I want to debut the Gary. So we're at 1:11 local time. I think another 20 minutes or so and we're done with this episode. I want to unveil brand new Gary Paul rainbow labeled photos that Gary just finished based on the Mullen paper. And Gary even punched in the latitude and longitude of the sample sites within the Chilliwack that the Mullen team used to make sure that he's got the right dates within the Chilliwack to showcase. Because what's the name of this episode? Chilliwack Rainbow, baby. Gary, go, baby, go. Ready? World premiere. View south from Ruth Mountain. Green, Chilliwack, 32. Green, Chilliwack, 27 to 32. Crystal and Core. Mount Rainier purple, Glacier Peak purple, Icy Peak green, Bacon Peak with some Chuckanut orange, Hannigan. So Gary's playing with different colors for different ages. Everything's in flux. Gary. Ansel Adams, Chilliwack Batholith, 30. You know what we're doing. You're like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He just had Chilliwack 25, and now he's got Chilliwack 30. He obviously is making a bunch of mistakes. No, he's not. It's Chilliwack Rainbow. Gary has taken the time to geolocate these photos and have it sync up with the most recent 2018 dates that the Mullen team put together. Bravo, Gary. He did all this, by the way, waiting for his refrigerator repairman to show up or something. I don't know. Glacier Peak purple, younger than 1 million, or greater than 1 million, sorry. Lindsay Malone wants in on the act. Chilliwack 32, Baker River phase. Very, very old basement rock, gray, Tommy Hoy Peak, Goat Mountain. Mount Severett. Lindsay's like, I guess I'll use the brown, yellow, I'll make it some sort of bronze color. So we're all kind of playing with different color options. Oh, same photo, sun's going down, Lindsay. Same photo, sun went behind the skyline. Nice job, Lindsay. Thank you. Lindsay didn't know about the new paper, but her color choices are right on the mark. Thank you. Okay, we left some green Chilliwack. Gary, do we have any red Chilliwack between 25 and 19? It's Chilliwack Rainbow after all. Of course we do. Red Chilliwack. I guess this is in the Chilliwack. Mount Ram Caldera, yellow. View southwest from Mount Spickard. I zoom in on each of these just because I want to give you a few extra seconds to enjoy. And just getting tighter in some of these photos just helps us read and appreciate these labels so much more. I don't know a damn thing about this caldera. I didn't know calderas could be that old, or did I? Oh, I guess Paul Hammond has some calderas in the 20s now that I think about it. Taptoe Lake, view south from Taptoe Lake, a beautiful reflection of Whatcom Peak. Push in. Oh yeah, we got purple Chilliwack. We got red Chilliwack. 22, 22.75, 9.53. Fun. Gary's now just like showing off. Like, yeah, you want Chilliwack? Fine. I got yellow Chilliwack and green Chilliwack. I got 32 million year old Lower Ruth Creek, and I've got Severett Gabbro, 10.27. What a treat this is to have somebody this knowledgeable spending time for us. All I can do is thank you, Gary, again. We got more purple Chilliwack, by the way. Ha! What a shot. Lake Anne, the reflection of Mount Shuckson, made of Cretaceous Shuckson green schist. And part of the Chilliwack Batholith that's younger than 3 million years old, the Lake Anne Pluton. There's more. Green Chilliwack, purple Chilliwack, red Chilliwack. You get the point by now. Come on, man. You get the point by now. There's no way we can stamp a green 35 on the Chilliwack. That was redunculous. What was I thinking? Okay. That's the end of the Chilliwack for now, but I have the striking suspicion it will be back. We finish up today with a couple of loose ends and also a quick visit to the index. Because the index and the Squire Creek and the earliest days of the Chilliwack are all green, and they're all active roughly at the same time. So it's the earliest chapter in this green Pluton story, as I'm currently understanding it. But before we get to that, Persis, I was showing this last time, remember, early days, light blue, and we made the case from Jamie McDonald's work and Jeff Tepper's work and others that the Youngs Creek Plutons are the same stuff as the Mount Persis volcanics, and that there's a volcanic plutonic tie between these two places. And as I was literally walking home on Saturday when I was done with you last time, I said, boy, we never did get a Mount Persis photo, I guess. Huh, it's weird. And then as I'm walking home on Saturday, I'm like, I've seen Mount Persis. Gary Paul and I did a scouting video, and we were writing a script for the PBS show with Mount Index and Mount Persis and two peaks with two different stories. And finally, Brady said, no, we're not doing two mountains in the same episode. But that was the Persis scene that I remembered. So Jamie McDonald, thank you, sent this photo with a Mefik enclave, I might add. Plutons for the Persis volcanics. Pluton for the Persis volcanics. Tom in Maple Valley giving us a map. Now here's US Highway 2, here's Monroe. Index is right here. We filmed that episode that we're submitting for Emmy nomination. Persis is right next door. I totally botched that. I forgot it. So here's, to finish today, some videos from the Mount Index area in the 30s.
We are looking at the combined force of the North Fork and South Fork of the Skykomish River. So we have the Mighty Sky right here.
Mighty Sky.
Mighty Sky. And starting on the left, we have a kind of unassuming, bumpy looking mountain. That's Philadelphia Mountain. It's entirely comprised of igneous rock of the Index Batholith.
Thank you.
And coming to the right, we're looking right up at the north peak of Mount Index.
My goodness.
Yeah, and that's about 5,400 feet, and we're elevation here is about 3,000 feet. So that's a big hill. And most of that is index granite, but not, the mountain is also part of the Melange Belt, a Metagabbro, according to our map.
Yep.
And then swinging a little further to the right here, the next big thing right towering above us is Mount Persis. Mount Persis is famous for its the Persis volcanics, which span from the top of the hill all the way down to the bottom here. And I think you'd have to look. There might be some bumps and little blips of index kind of sticking up on the side of it there.
We know where that is. Let's keep going. Gary, let's take a close look at the index granite itself, please, at the rock quarry.
Well, I think that, you have rocks that people like to climb on.
Yeah.
And rocks they don't like to climb on. And one of the type of rocks they like to climb on is this very nice, clean granite, which is while there's a bunch of it in the Cascades, as we just talked about,
right,
the accessibility of this to Seattle makes it really a draw for a lot of folks to come out and experience some really nice rock.
Good old-fashioned granite.
It is a beautiful granite for sure. Yet another Gary makes his appearance. Kalamazoo Gary, who must have been out here vacationing, and sends this beautiful photo of a chunk of the index granite, the index pluton, with a mafic enclave within it. Now, hang on. We've got a new paper. This date isn't right. We have our new paper. According to the new work and the most precise dates we have for the index pluton is now 33.5 million years old. One more from Gary as we are scouting. We're scouting for ideas for a new episode of Nick on the Rocks, which this was scouted in early June, and I think we got Brady Lawrence to come out with us like the next week, and we filmed it for real. And that one turned out really well, and that's how we're finishing today. We're going to finish with the finished episode, the glossy episode of Index, Mount Index. Gary?
Okay. Is Gold Bar, and then you go on down to Startup, Sultan, Monroe.
Okay.
And Gold Bar is kind of the western edge of some of the bedroom communities, I think, for Seattle. Yeah, we picked a heck of a day here. I mean, with fresh snow up here in the mountains coming out.
Good God. Okay. It looks like the Matterhorn. It's not. What is this peak here?
We're looking at Mount Index.
That's Mount Index.
And there's actually 3 peaks. The one that we're looking at that's with the rock exposed is the North Peak, which is about 5,400 feet tall. And then the white in the background there is the main peak, which is just about 6,000 feet. Huh. And there's a middle peak in between that we can't really see from here. Okay. And if we swing around to the right, we have this whole Anderson Creek Basin, which drains off of the west face of the North Peak and the middle peak into Anderson Creek. And then off to the right here in the clouds is Mount Persis, which is about 5,400 feet. And I mean, they're not like any huge elevation or anything up there at the top, but I'm not sure what we're at here, like maybe 300, 400 feet above sea level. Yeah. So it's they're big mountains for being so short. And I think the interesting thing about this, and I learned this from Daryl Cowan a couple years ago, and I had no concept of Mount Index. I always thought, Mount Index, that's all that index granite.
Yeah.
And then Daryl said, like, well, you know, the upper part of Mount Index is a big block of metagabbro from in the Melange Belt. And I'm like, what? Which sent me home to look at the map, and it's like, oh my God, he's right about that. I had no idea.
So most of the upper part of that peak is gabbro.
Supposedly. And I have an article I brought along because there's these two.
All right, so we're about to show this episode. Gary Paul is doing extra duty for us in this alphabet series. He's also been a major player in working with us with the PBS show. There's the young videographer, Brady Lawrence, who's flying a drone right now, but he does everything: audio, video, drone, and editing. Before I show this, to finish our episode today, Mark Jennings, I read your comment which just said something like, stop using the colors, just give us the dates. I'm interested in what you all think. Now that we've made significant adjustments to the color scheme, should we keep the colors? Are the colors suddenly kind of meaningless? What's the purpose of the colors? Maybe it's worth thinking about that. In my mind, I'm still imagining maps that I'm coloring using our color scheme with natural breaks, and they're just not firmly tied to the decades like I thought originally. But maybe Mark's got a point. Maybe a bunch of you are like, okay, the color thing is, I don't see why you're continuing with colors if we're getting off of the well-defined decades. Maybe I shouldn't get off the well-defined decades. Maybe that's another question. What do you think? Should I stick with the... Were the colors nice and easy to remember? Green for the 30s, red for the 20s, and then we just... Maybe I'm too fluid here. To finish the episode today, the Mount Index episode, which will be 7 minutes long, and then we'll open it up to your live questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this very unique episode. Colors, new science, and adjustments to our plan.
Backcountry hiking today up to Lake Serene at the base of Mount Index. Look at that. 3,500 vertical feet of index granite. Famous in geology, famous from rock climbers around the world. The whole valley's full of index granite. But the uppermost part of Mount Index is not granite. It's far older rock that formed at the bottom of the ocean. What a river. The Skykomish. And these boulders, big and small, the index granite. Well, that's Mount Index over that shoulder, 33 million years old. It's a batholith, the index batholith, which simply means there's a hell of a lot of granite here in this area. That was originally magma chamber rock, underground, in the dark. We remove the heat, that magma turns to solid rock, and then it's brought to the surface so that we can see it. There's more than 100 square miles of the index batholith exposed, not just at that mountain, But Philadelphia Mountain, many of the other ridges and hills, and many of these boulders along the river, they're all index batholith. To get a very careful and close look at the detail of this rock, let's head over to a very famous rock quarry. The towering walls of the index granite. This is a historic place, a rock quarry, where we can get a good close-up look at this beautiful granite. Back more than 100 years ago, they quarried the granite out for the construction of Smith Tower in downtown Seattle, and even the state capitol building in Olympia. Rock climbers love this place because of the texture of the granite. You can see the white feldspars, the gray quartzes, the black biotites, the black hornblends. It's Geology 101 here. This is textbook granite. But it's the walls themselves that are striking. And they are visible here on this side of the valley and back across the way to Mount Index itself. These are the majestic sheer walls of the Norwegian buttresses, as they're called. Mount Index. Looks pretty familiar. It's just like the rock quarry across the valley, right? Index granite, 33 million years old. But above Lake Serene, we have the same sheer walls. And there's a glacial story. Lake Serene, in this beautiful cirque, was carved by glacial ice. You can see these amazing striations in this polished bedrock. So the Ice Age erosion did a good number on eroding a lot of this rock for us to take a peek inside of the mountain. But this magma chamber 33 million years ago is shallow level, and the magma is eating its way into older rock that's at the top of Mount Index. What is that rock at the top of Mount Index? Well, we saved the biggest surprise for the end of this episode. The upper 1/3 of Mount Index is not granite. It's this stuff, gabbro, which is a very rare rock. It's basically a black granite, mostly dark-colored plagioclase feldspar crystals. But the shocking thing is that the upper third of Mount Index was formed under the ocean floor in the Pacific Ocean more than 140 million years ago. Yes, magma chamber rock, but the magmas were below the ocean floor in the Pacific. You cool off that magma, you form this gabbro more than 140 million years ago, you add it to the edge of North America before the Cascades ever thought of getting started. Then 33 million years ago, you have the Index granite eating its way up through when it was a magma, but doesn't get to the surface. And what are you left with? A mountain that violates one of the most basic laws in geology. I thought the deeper you go, the older you get, and the shallower you go, the younger you get. Not true in this case. The older stuff's at the top, the younger stuff's at the bottom. Mount Index, two completely different kinds of rock making up the same mountain. Wow!
series was made possible.
Okay. We didn't quite get to the Squire Creek Pluton. There's one clip that we'll start with next time. We'll talk about the Ohanapikosh. We'll talk about a number of other things happening in the 30s. It's time for some live questions. Get your uppercase ready, please. We'll do 10 minutes or so of this and then say goodbye. I have much of what I need for the next episode together. So that's a relief because I'll be busy with the lecture series tomorrow from the auditorium. Questions about this content today? The Plutons, the filming of Nick on the Rocks, anything you'd like to do. Inspired animation for the process of emplacement and exhumation. Thank you. I often wonder if the animations are working. I'm iffy on some of them. But yeah, I thought that one was helpful. Thank you. David, what hypothesis could be formulated and tested to determine whether the batholiths are interconnected? Good question, David. I'm assuming that if you have well-defined, precise, accurate dates for each of the plutons, and the dates are significantly different from each other, and the chemistry is significantly different from each other, then you're not connecting them anymore. But if they're very similar in age and similar in chemistry, then maybe there's a geophysical approach. I don't really know. A different David. In the Chilliwack, did the later magmatic intrusions inject into solid or molten material? Did the pluton solidify at any point? If the pluton was fluid, was there any mixing? Thank you. Even though we have distinctly different ages over the course of 35 million years, I assume that each generation has solidified and become solid rock before the next batch. That's an assumption. And that begs the question, how much time do you need to go from molten to solid? I don't really know where we are on that currently. What data we have to say that magmas cool over the course of a decade or a century or 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years? I don't really know. You're like, you don't? No, I don't. Dennis, is Mount Shuksan volcanic as well? It's definitely in the neighborhood. No, Dennis. Mount Shuksan is made out of green schist, which is 160 million years old and formed in a subduction zone, much, much older than the Cascades. You're right, it's in the neighborhood, though. Science is often messy and complicated. I'm okay with adjusting a hypothesis when it needs to happen. In the spirit of science, the process must be fluid. Thank you. Yeah, I will enjoy reading your comments about the color scheme and if you feel like major changes are warranted or if no changes are warranted or if the colors are still helpful. Jeff is saying goodbye. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us. A few more. Leslie, is this the start of subduction? In the prior two episodes, Leslie, we started the subduction at 46 million years ago in Washington. And today's topic, we're firing up the Chilliwack and the Squire Creek and the Index at 35. But that's not the start of the arc. So your question might be, why was it really quiet between 40 and 35? I think it was. And if it was quiet all through the Cascade Volcanic Arc between 40 and 35, then what happened 35 to get the system going again? And then what happened 32 to have this massive flare-up in the Chilliwack, and maybe the Chilliwack only? That's the other comment. Another thread is that we're working with the dates we have and the chemistry we have. It's still pretty much the Dark Ages. There's some plutons that haven't been looked at all. Or if they have looked at, it's been 40, 50, 60 years since they've been looked at. That's what Hannah Shamloo and Mike Eddy are doing at Goat Rocks and Spirit Lake, respectively. They're coming in with new techniques that we didn't have a generation ago. In Hannah's case, Kelly Wall had been doing some work 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. But I think in Mike Eddy and Isla's case, they're coming into the Spirit Lake Pluton a generation after the last most recent work. And I have that's another reason we're looking at places like the Chilliwack and how a modern paper, quote unquote, leaps us major steps forward. I have no doubt that the Spirit Lake Pluton will have a major leap forward with the precision that Mike and Isla can bring. 3 more and we're done. Thirst fast. Any drill program slated to determine if the batholiths are connected? Not that I'm aware of. That sounds like an expensive project. And I don't know if it would be more than, that's just an academic question, I think. John, was Gary hinting at the unneed of colors with his black and white photos? Maybe. I just like the look of it. I'm not sure why Gary went in that direction, but I really like it. Alan, please keep up the colors and stay on YouTube. And thank you for, okay, thank you. Colors, Colours. I know you UK people when I see you. Or maybe Aussies. Do you spell it that way as well? Patrick, do the size of the Pluton's batholiths give an idea how many eruptive vents each had? Why so few vents today? We'll finish with this idea. It's another teaser for Saturday. Can I even do it verbally? I'll try. One of the things I'm going to be thinking about between now and Saturday, which is not that far away, is if the main phase of high flux magmas in the Chilliwack are happening at the same time, roughly, that this thick pile of Ohanapakash lavas are piling up at Rainier. I think that's true. If those 2 major things are happening, Chilliwack and Rainier, essentially, and nowhere else, is it possible there's a Chilliwack-like batholith beneath the Ohanapakash lavas in today's Mount Rainier? And was a thick pile of green Ohanapakash lavas once upon a time up by Mount Baker and have been totally eroded away? Yes or no to both of those questions? I happen to think that's a really interesting question. Here's to you. Green. Here's to you joining us for our first green show, our show in the decade of the 30s in the Cascade Volcanic Arc. Here's to your health. Here's to the health of everyone in your community, near and far. Here's to Gary Paul for continuing to add so much color to our series this winter. Thank you, Gary. And here's to Jeff Tepper, who has given, it's adding up to a lot of numbers of hours now that Jeff Tepper is devoting to us by email, with Zoom interviews, sending papers, reacting, being in the live chat, all of that. Jeff, thank you for being so involved in what we're doing. We greatly appreciate it. And thanks to all of us for hanging with the series. Thank you for keeping up with the series. I love you, and we will see you next on Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Pacific time, on Saturday, January 25th of 2025. Thank you. I love you, and goodbye from Ellensburg, Washington, USA. Finally put my hard candy back in my mouth. Herky jerky. It's got to be a cord thing. I've rebooted everything. I've unplugged and plugged. Let me try this again. Is this herky jerky? That's the one that was herky jerky before. What is it about sitting in the window? What is it about sitting in the window? I literally just changed the two cameras. That's all I changed. Like their position. I didn't even switch their cords or anything. I don't think I did. Maybe I switched the cords. All right. Thank you. Goodbye.